Bathurst is a town steeped in industrial history. The rail yards are a symbol of that. Our reporter Brodie Owen took a look at just one example of the changing industrial landscape in Bathurst.
Wartime Prime Minister Ben Chifley was a champion for Middle Australia, his humility nurtured by Bathurst rail yards. The rail yards were a hive of human activity, a centre of regional freight, employing workers in the hundreds. It was the place for a young, ambitious man to launch a stellar career in rail and Labor politics. Trains like this one used to roll in and out up to 80 times a day. Now, few and far in between. A proud rail town has lost its shine. Commuter services are at a skeletal capacity. Once busy subways and platforms now redundant. Lyle O'Reilly began work at Bathurst Station in the 70s. Rail was booming.
I worked in the era down here when we had 500 employees in Bathurst alone, and it's just gone.
In the latest sign of the times, engineering giant Downer Rail has changed tack, halting production of locally built bogie frames to support other builds.
If you look at the history of Bathurst, this Bathurst location, it's evolved and changed as the market's required, or as the business is required to support the customers.
That means Downer's manufacturing operations in Bathurst have ceased. The Bathurst facility is now wholly maintenance and service of existing rail fleets.
There's been changes to the way that manufacturing is taking place throughout the world, and Australia has a place in that globalisation of manufacturing.
Will things change in the future? We can't predict what the future will be, what the markets will require. But right at the moment, and that was a small part of our business, that stopped, but we've had increased growth in other areas.
While Bathurst no longer builds the bogie, Downer insists they are here to stay. Brodie Owen, Grassroots Politics.
The Australian Electoral Commission estimates the seat of Calais has more than 17,000 unregistered eligible youth voters, a whopping 23% of the region's population without a voice. This week I explored this issue with an expert in politics. Take a look.
Young voters in the Central West could be key stakeholders in the upcoming federal election, but only if they make a stand. CSU politics lecturer Dr. Oliver Villa says greater political engagement among youth allows for better opportunities and prospects to improve society, but an emphasis on voting is misleading.
There's an assumption that by voting is going to make a difference. I don't think there's going to make any difference at all. I think the bigger thing you can do, as I said, is really inform yourself, educate yourself, and do more than putting pressure and actually take that activist role. I think that's what's lacking with the young generation today.
Dr. Villa says it's much more difficult in regional areas for anyone to get involved when it is much easier to switch off.
Whereas here, I think it's not surprising what you're saying, because I think it's a lot more isolated from the rest of the country. So there is no wonder there's going to be a detachment from politics. So this is the big problem that we're facing today, is that in isolated areas, it's actually becoming worse.
Earlier this year, journalism student Jennifer Hall went to the G20 Youth Summit in Russia as Australia's Young Minister for Culture. She believes young voters are being marginalised and aren't being targeted as a large and important voting demographic, but it's up to you to change that.
They need to maybe take the first step and start prioritising some issues that are important to young people, to basically not allow politicians to ignore us anymore.
Philip Lee, Grassroots.